Grace Askerbach is the registrar of the Eliz, and together we'll be giving the reg speech for this debate. Bjorn is registrar of the Phil, usually he'd be giving the private business meeting, but he's white and a man, so he's excluded in this debate. And isn't that ironic? This is a debate about inclusion, but we start by excluding our registrar because of his race and gender. And I think that's interesting. The Eliz and the Udoma are subcommittees created to reduce inequality, but they're inherently exclusionary. You can't join the Udoma if you're not a person of colour, and you can't join the Eliz if you're not a woman or a gender minority. This raises questions like, is the goal of inclusion hypocritical? Or if these exclusionary subcommittees are effective, does that mean that inclusion really will not save us? Some second-rate feminists in America wanted to exclude black women from the feminist movement because they thought if they combined the issues of civil rights with feminism, they would lose support. There's been somewhat of a tendency for minorities to distance themselves from each other out of a fear that combining two movements would make the struggle twice as difficult. In this debate, I want to see exactly why that isn't true. How exactly is there strength in solidarity? Also, we have two esteemed guest speakers at this debate today. We have Pradeep, Mahadeshwar, and Yemi, Adenuga. It's Pradeep's birthday today, and it was Yemi's birthday yesterday. They're going to enter the chamber very shortly, so I'm going to ask you to sing happy birthday when we all walk in. All right? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Are there any objections to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate representation of the last private business meeting? There being none, I shall duly sign. Madam Treasurer, are there any fines?
There are no fines.
Madam, Mr. Secretary, are there any reports to be read?
There are no reports to be read.
The time for questions is now open.
Mr. Secretary, are there any motions on notice?
There are no motions on notice.
The time for questions is now closed.
This brings us on to general business of the society. Are there any motions to be raised in general business? There being no further business, this private business meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, after.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Our secretary shall now retire and return with the speakers of this debate. Here. I call this house to order and call the registrar to read the minutes of the last public business meetings.
Yesterday, Udoma's very own Pradeep won the hissed performative male contest. Jay! No, that was last week's thing, guys. Completely random audience members. We don't want to shame Pradeep. No matter how silly or trite it may seem on the surface, I'm sure it meant a lot to him. And men everywhere who just want to be included for once. Just picture him in the morning, pulling his little Ugg booties on, carefully strapping two labubu's to his baggy pants, shaking his hips and screaming, H-O-T-T-O, in giddy excitement at the cloud that lay before him that day. I personally can't feel anything for this man other than genuinely happy for him. And for those of you not in the know on the online lore of the performative male, his act has been defined as, and I'll just substitute Pradeep's name from here on, since he is the peak performative man. Pradeep is doing a mating dance, puffing out his feathers in pursuit of female attention. Pradeep is designed to look alluring and non-threatening and intelligent to and for women. The only thing I resent really is how the women, no matter how desperately they want to be included, are instead ridiculed for trying to appeal to men in the same way. They're called picky girls, derogatory. Women turn on them, unable to stomach the sight of that small hand lift by the large hand of a man. And men still belittle them for their sports knowledge despite their intense studying the week prior to the game. They can never win. There will be no performative female contest, no pick-me girl off, because we hate these women who are trying so hard to be included. We can't bear to take it in good fun the way we do it to be. We live in a world plagued by double standards, where to be as in Pradeep's case, aw, that's cute, to complete repudiation. When you leave your circle for another, you risk the doors closing behind you. You might get stuck in the middle where neither side will accept you anymore. So, what to do? Will inclusion save us? Does inclusion imply integration? Will the circles have to merge to ever solve this age-old conundrum, or can we move through osmosis back and through our categorizations? Do we want to be included, and will the benefits ever outweigh the costs? Today we have two expert guest speakers to help us decide this motion. Pradeep Mahadeshwar on side proposition, and Cllr. Yemi Adenuga on side opposition. Pradeep, who goes by he, they pronouns, is a visual artist and LGBTQIA+ activist from India, now based in Dublin. He is a founder of Queer Asian Pride Ireland and the Queer Spectrum Film Festival. Through his work, he delves into the complexities of the lived experience of queer POC in Ireland and beyond. Also, on side proposition, we have Tippy Pate, Secretary of Udoma, who I'm sure I made you all quite familiar with by now, and Darren Henley, this year's president of the Eliz. On side opposition, we have Cllr. Adenuga, who is a Nigerian-Irish politician who became the first elected black female politician in Ireland when she was sworn into Meath County Council. Today, she continues to spearhead various initiatives like the Voice to Men Project and the Meath Stand Against Racism campaign to promote social justice, with a particular focus on inequality in Ireland's current social and political landscape. Joining us today, we also have Nakai Mudiwa, full committee member, and Hamza Asaf, co-chair of Udoma. Also, actors intact on SS Street, so please come. Thank you.
Are there any objections to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate record of the last public business meeting? There being none, I shall duly sign. Welcome everybody to the University Philosophical Society. The motion that stands before us tonight is this House believes that inclusion will not save us. Standing orders are as follows. Speeches are a maximum of 7 minutes. After the first minute and before the last minute of each speech, it will be signified by a bell. Speakers from opposing sides and audience members are free to offer points of information in between these times. We encourage general audience participation during our events or debates. If you hear something you like, you can shout slay or hear, and if you hear something you don't like, shout shame. We prioritize respect and dignity here, and as a result, if anyone has any concerns about anything that is said, our senior member of council, Rosa, is contactable via email at smc@tcdphil.com. Alternatively, I am available at stewart@tcdphil.com. Our lovely registrar has already introduced our speakers, so I call upon the first speaker to be part of the opening to the day. Here.
Before we begin, everybody, can I make it clear, I was not performing, that was the real me. But Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're here to discuss inclusion and what it means to everyone here. What does it really mean? Inclusion is a very broad term. It could be something as simple as kids on the playground letting them play with them. It could be the very well-known corporate grad schemes that hire people of color women to help them break into careers. Inclusion can be when you and your friends at that weird Northside fella hang around at Dice Knees before you run away from him. Inclusion is something we all are very well familiar with. But I'd rather talk about what inclusion isn't, even though what we think it may be. Inclusion is not the creation of the 17th organization on campus titled Women's in Ex-Corporate Careers. These organizations often claim themselves as inclusive when all they do is exist to prop up rich, privileged white women. This is not inclusion when every single day underprivileged young girls and young women are denied access to education and enlightenment that their privileged peers are included into. My own younger sister was denied the opportunity to study business and science simultaneously, simply because her public school decided that home economics was more important. We do not need to look to oppressive regimes or Afghanistan to see the issues our women face today. Ladies and gentlemen, inclusion is not the creation of another half-assed mentorship scheme for people of color and another mid-tier law or finance firm designed to offer them some laissez-faire guidance and mentorship. This is not inclusion when every single day POC and underrepresented background people in these offices are excluded based off the fact they don't know what's happening. They don't know the slang and they don't know the party habits of their South Dublin or privileged peers. Inclusion is not something you think you see. Inclusion is everywhere, but it is nowhere. It is something people of color, women, and people of all backgrounds backgrounds, they try grasp with their hands, but it falls through their hands like sand, because it is not real. It is a farce, and it will not save us today or any time. First and foremost, I'd like to discuss the idea of the inclusivity efforts as we all know them, and how, despite purporting themselves to uplift underrepresented backgrounds, they do nothing to address the structural barriers these people face, and as such, they are nothing short of hollow. DEI efforts exist almost everywhere, and big corporations, as they seek to suck up grads, will always show themselves as inclusive. And they will have their schemes, they will have their mentorship programs, they will have their promotions, or they have their one black person in the advertisement. This is all a farce and other inclusion efforts. Inclusion we see also on an education level. I'm sure many of you might be aware of a thing called affirmative action. Affirmative action existed in the USA to allow POC, specifically African Americans, access and engage with top colleges. Once again, you might think that these schemes are good. You might think that they help underrepresented people break into education and careers. But these schemes are nothing but quotas. You see the quotas and you think we're making progress, when the barriers and structures beneath them are never touched and are left to rot. From top down, we see progress, underneath it is festering. Nothing ever changes. Take the idea of the grad schemes and the educational barriers we face in Ireland. You see the HERE scheme, one of the most prominent schemes in Ireland, which helps to address people from underrepresented backgrounds, underrepresented minorities, to access education, and a lot of the barriers for the careers. What the HERE scheme does not do is address the fact that the Irish education system continuously and forever will favour rich, privileged people with access to private schools and tutoring, something you see every single day. Remember, that one laissez-faire, stupid Bez guy you know who got 625 went to the Institute of Education. That is the only reason he stands where he stands. Remember, affirmative action approved by the US government. You might think, when it was repealed, that this was the worst thing they had done, that affirmative action is what helped African Americans access the top Ivy League colleges. But what it does not do is address the fact that the reason African Americans too often fail to reach these colleges is because the American government has continuously destabilized and disenfranchised their communities, flooding them with drugs, flooding them with violence, and flooding them with decades of destabilization, which prevent future childhoods and future young African Americans from accessing colleges which they otherwise are capable of. Ladies and gentlemen, these forms of retroactive inclusionary efforts will never uplift the people they aim to uplift. They will never change the status quo. They are merely a cop-out answer. They are merely tokens they put forward to make us think that change is happening, which lets the system feel good, but in reality, nothing ever changes where it should. So, if inclusion is not changing the status quo, why is it pushed everywhere? And what actually will change the status quo? It's very simple. In this day and age, inclusion in DEI is nothing short of a box to be ticked and a token to be put forward. If anything, the only thing that will help us, it will not be the poisonous olive branches put forward by those who are inclusionary. Their schemes will not help us. The only thing that will put our feet forward is our merit and our merit alone. The DEI measures focus on pretending all is well, and pretending they are pushing forward these underrepresented candidates. But would it surprise anyone that what it actually does is make martyrs out of them? Would it surprise anyone if I told you some of the most prominent private schools in this country only saw their first person of colour graduate within the last 3 to 5 years? Would it surprise you if I told you that same person of colour who was the first and last to graduate from that school is on every single school website? Would it surprise you if I told you that same person of colour was softly ostracized and isolated from their peers because they were seen as tokens? The system as it exists makes martyrs out of the individuals it aims to help, and we cannot let this go on for any further. These people, they're very hard work. The backgrounds they had to overcome are turned to nothing. They are seen as undeserving. They are seen as getting handouts. They're not seen for the struggle they put in. They are seen for the DEI inclusive measures that they are given. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that this cannot be the step forward. We cannot stand by and let a system which picks and chooses who can succeed from different backgrounds. We have to be the ones to put ourselves forward. Ladies and gentlemen, when DEI is tokenistic and does nothing for us, does nothing to fix the system from the bottom up, it makes everyone seem undeserving. So, how do we escape this? It's very simple. If inclusion will not save us, we must save us ourselves. We must take and rest on our merit and our merit alone. The system can only be changed by partaking in it, not by living in its shadow, by being better than the system. When we discuss women in corporate careers, we discuss the discrimination and objectification they face. But you know who does not face that issue? The sharpest women who are at the top of the corporate ladder, the head partners, who have put the sharpest heel beyond their men around them. When we discuss the issues people of colour are facing accessing education and top careers. Do you know who does not face those issues? The people of color, the immigrants, the South Asians, the Indians, the Chinese, the African Americans, the Western Europeans, who are immigrants in Great Britain, yet they outperform the Great British people in their own exams every year consistently. We must see people for their work and not for their background. We must understand that we cannot let our skin, our gender, or anything about us define us other than our very merit itself. And thank you. If we can save ourselves, our communities will not need to be included. We do not need inclusion. We do not need to play any games. We do not need to seek their factors or their hand to lift us up. Ladies and gentlemen, instead of chasing the shadows of success that they put forward, we must seek to create our own shadows and step out of theirs. Thank you.
Before I begin my speech, I'd like to address a little elephant in the room. As president of the Eliz, it is fallen upon me to represent my subcommittee, or else risk the all too common debacle of being the member of the freeway who just stands there and watches. However, as you may have noticed, I am in fact white. It could be worse. I could be a white man. I could be English, or I could actually be beyond. That being said, I am definitely the least qualified person on the bench to stand before the House this evening and state that inclusion cannot save us, because in the vast majority of cases, I, as a white woman, am not affected by exclusion. I can, however, speak towards the topic of inclusivity when it comes to gender. Our favorite performative male to be has done an excellent job introducing our side and explaining the hollowness that is often present in inclusivity and DEI programs today, and it is now my job to continue the proposition's argument. I am not here to argue that inclusion itself is bad. Inclusion is a very good and necessary thing, and I do believe that we need it. However, inclusion alone cannot save us. If it is not coupled with further systematic change, it is purely cosmetic. Inclusion cannot be entirely successful if societal power is largely founded upon exclusion, which will never save us, because that is placing a band-aid on top of a bullet hole. I agree with the arguments presented by the opposition bench that exclusion will never save us, but we must first acknowledge the barriers that exclusivity serves towards the road to true equality. If we do not work first to address the flaws within the system itself, then inclusion will always be presented at a cost to others. It is a deeply unfortunate part of our world that people feel the need to oppress others, even if they themselves have experienced oppression. This is the logic that many political systems have operated on for centuries. People have been willing to throw others under the bus if it means that they will be included as a part of the chosen few, the select elite of the white patriarchal hegemony. The early suffragette movements in the US serve as a prime example of this. In fighting for their own right to vote, many of the suffragettes were willing to stay quiet on the topic of other marginalized people. Susan B. Anthony, one of the leaders of American women's suffrage, stated that she would rather cut off her right arm than advocate for people of color to gain the right to vote before white women did. In the 1913 March on Washington, black women were not allowed to march in the same crowd as white women, and were told that if they wanted to march for their right to vote, they would have to do so at the back of the crowd. This racist mindset has plagued feminist movements for decades, and has been a massive hurdle to women of color and feminism as a whole. Inclusion cannot provide salvation if it is conditional. We moved from first wave feminism to fourth wave and beyond, and this issue still hasn't been solved. Now we watch Alex Cooper interview Megan Fox on what it means to be a girl boss, keeping upper-class white women firmly installed on a pedestal of privilege, while the Afghan women oppressed by the Taliban and the Palestinian women being murdered in Gaza have a fraction of the voice that they should. And yet, even by excluding women on the margins in order to be included, what has truly been gained? Women have attained the plethora of rights over the past century, sure, and yet the wage gap is still wide. Violence against women still occurs at astonishing rates, and politicians who don't believe that women should have a right to bodily autonomy are being voted into public office in record numbers. Women as a collective are still suffering, despite the fact that the feminist movement has exploited others to gain certain liberties. What good is it to be given a seat at the table, to be included, when the table itself only exists on the premise that there are people who will never get to sit at it? If we don't weed out bigotry by its roots and and work to deconstruct systematic oppression, then inclusion is a losing game. Furthermore, inclusion, however good and right its intentions may be, is never a fast process. Surface-level inclusion is too often treated as a magic fix to end racism, sexism, homophobia, and beyond, and is used as a tool to grant untimely forgiveness for exclusion. When inclusion is viewed simply as a box to tick, as to be argued, it becomes engulfed in our capitalistic society's desire to have everything as soon as we can, at the snap of a finger, and to experience gratification of what we wish to be in an instant. When women were given the right to vote, their opinions were not magically taken seriously by their husbands and fathers and the men that were still in power. When slavery was abolished in the United States, racism did not disappear from society with the snap of a finger. The deep scars of enslavement were not amnesically forgotten by an entire diaspora of people. Bestowing rights upon a historically marginalized group of people does not automatically erase centuries of oppression. Human rights for all people, no matter your race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or economic status, are absolutely necessary, but they cannot reach their full potential if inclusion is not coupled with the deconstruction of bigotry. Inclusion is absolutely a step in the right direction, but you can only step through the door if it's actually open in the first place. Here at Trinity, our hands are not clean of the history of exclusion. We sit here on a campus that was founded by a colonial power in a building owned by the two oldest debating societies in the world that didn't allow women to become members until 60 years ago, a mere minute in their 400 plus years of existence. The Eliz, despite being created as a way for women to be included in debating at Trinity, has been historically a society run by and for white, cisgender Protestant women. We can't pave the way to true inclusion without properly acknowledging the sins of our past and working first to purge ourselves of exclusive tendencies so that true sacrosanct inclusion can be achieved. Inclusion cannot save us if we do not first remove the hatred on which our systems of government and society are built and fully recognize the horrors that exclusion has brought upon human history. It is with this that I implore you to support the proposition this evening. Thank you.
access to structures that were designed with Adenuga, and building new structures that do have first studying medicine and learned how to recognize melanomas using textbooks that only included images on white skin. AI models are now being built using these models and also carry this bias. So we see the problem. Inclusion doesn't just mean that multicultural groups of friends laughing on college booths and bound to be featured in promo materials for years to come. To this whole thing, right? It means being included and equal in aspects of life that can so easily be taken for granted by so many of us. Medical care, safety, quality of life. This is obviously just one facet of inclusion, but in my opinion, it's the one that shows us that it really is that deep. That for people who complain that it's all gone too far and it's too woke, we don't need feminism anymore, and what I'm dangerous from those against, because why wouldn't they let me pursue medicine? I just have my junior cert, but I got a distinction in biology, and my dad said I really have an interest in human anatomy, but my mom said maybe I should find a healthier way of expressing it. Inclusion saves someone every day. A fundamental fact of society is that each person relies on the goodwill of others to get them through each day. So instead of alienating people who depend on the goodwill of governments and education boards to let them have a home and an education, saying that it's none of your business, not your problem, just be grateful that all you have to depend on is the goodwill of that barista making you a $5 matcha every day and complimenting your art accuracy. You might not need inclusion, but others do. Systematic and wide-reaching and considerate inclusion, and it will save us. And by us, I mean the people in society who need it most, because we're only as good as those who experience our worst. Thank you. I urge you all to vote for the opposition.
Speech and call on Mr. Pradeep Mahadeshwar to close out the debate for the side opposition here.
Thank you for discussion. First of all, thank you, Adenuga, who sent me, and I was got excited. So what you are seeing now here, I'm a product of Ireland, biggest advocacy instrument, that is Mahadeshwar. And before that, we few people might be going far back. There was something else happened, that is the decriminalization of homosexuality. And I'm one of them who saw this island as a big hope, and it's a drive us to take our lives in our hand and live our safe haven country and something new and start from fresh. And what I'm asking nowadays myself, like what I have achieved coming to Ireland, who has decriminalized homosexuality, who has achieved marriage referendum by public vote, and also gender recognition, also something fundamental that HIV medication to public health. And what I see as an activist and artist who is running this grassroots organization, the inclusion is good. It's a nice word. It's very fancy and it's a broad term, inclusion, diversity. But what I feel strongly that Ireland haven't yet understood the true meaning of inclusion and diversity. What I see mostly that inclusion is coming from very cosmetic space, photographs, or there are people on articles, or there is life insurance ad with personal who is voting. But that is only this makeup work that actually didn't help we don't even have data. So what the policies and decisions have been made about inclusion and including minority, those are mostly decisions come from hypothetical. And that is not the inclusion we should look for first. Inclusion also affects my and people like me, our day-to-day life experience. And what I see, there is the existing power structure and hierarchies, and the structure of decision making that is not including the minorities or new people. Same people are doing same things. I just question, all these people doing the same people doing the same thing year after year, without even data, without even listening to the minority or different voices. What kind of inclusion they are producing and how they are implementing and what they are expecting. Most of these decisions on academic or art institutions or activism institutions, those are all decisions made by certain people in the room. There are not included diverse voices or diverse views into the discussion, and then there is a label that we are creating something inclusive policy, and that is something I found problematic. As an activist, I think it is not something futuristic. It is stale and backward. And inclusion itself is the existing implementation of word and inclusion. Itself, it is exclusion in disguise. Because certain people, certain set of people decide who is valid, who has right to bring on this table. If you go to the art institutions, there is the status quo. There is someone white mono-ethnic intellectual committee from same experience background. They will decide which artist should get and I feel frustrated, and I spoke with many of my artist friends who are from same background, that how beautiful you write the application and frame your experience for your art product, for your film. That application will end on someone white person's table who doesn't have your experience and what it feels like to an immigrant in this country. And not only queer immigrant, but all the immigrants' experience. Those decision makers don't involve any other direct voice. And I feel cheated also because I know there is Ireland has this unique problem of including traveler community into mainstream, and that just makes me frightened. That okay, so many years after independence, they haven't achieved that. So what is the guarantee in the next 50 years they will decide and make room for them like me? And that just make me frustrated. It is such a frustration that they don't want to listen any radical or critical or making voice. There is a national template that decide who will be included and which minority they want to focus or which minority group they want to bring on table to showcase that inclusion in our social and cultural landscape. Also, I also feel strongly that we are going just for the face value of inclusion. I have seen many cases. I worked for the global DEI in corporate work in my previous job, and what I have seen that justice is toxic and dangerous. And that is going to need to challenge what kind of inclusion do you want to implement and what to have. Having someone black CEO of company or trans actor in the fancy Netflix serial, it doesn't mean like all black people probably have been solved or all trans people are getting equal opportunity for the education, housing, and healthcare. So that is also something misquoted inclusion that is we should get away from and also challenge this inclusion of this contemporary implication of this word inclusion. Also, there is a passive racism including so inclusion still has a center of privilege. So if you go to any LGBT organ organization, there is a core committee of all monoclassic people. They will decide who will be included, who will be funded, who will get the support. And that's something again problem. People talk about inclusion, but they don't actually practice that inclusion because that holds the power, who has the power to include. And that is not a minority or diverse voice never has a chance to include anyone or create any place that could bring diverse voices. And we should focus more on knowledge share and power share and creativity. That is not certain understanding. That is okay, I'll conclude with that which inclusion is not only fight to bring someone on the table, because that is something legislative action. We need to build an alternative table. We need to build an alternative table that is suitable for those people who are actually marginalized, who actually deserve to be included. For example, I'm working on this project that I want to build something parallel of screen art that actually built by the people from diverse voices, and they will get equal footage in decision making and funding. Yeah, so I will conclude on that we made this inclusion that would be the broad sense and learning. We are not even scratching the ground yet. So I will conclude.
Maybe not the us in this room, but the us who have been kept outside of rooms like this for generations. Inclusion saves you when you're the only translator in a room. It saves you when you're the only black debater standing at the podium. And if you think it doesn't, then maybe you're never the one who needed saving. Before I get to my actual points, I want to touch on some topics brought upon by the members of the opposition. The Supreme Affirmative Debater here said that the only thing that will help us is our merit and merit alone. Yet merit alone assumes those in power judge us on merit. It assumes a colorblind world where we're only judged based on what we bring to the table. Let me tell you this. Do you think women weren't allowed in Trinity before 1904 because they didn't get enough points for it, or because their living salary rates weren't high enough? No. It is because they were excluded from entering this university, and it's only when they fought for the right to be included where they allowed it. We often talk about how inclusion can be formative or tokenistic. The truth of the matter is, this is a flaw of implementation, not the concept. You don't abandon medicine because some doctors do harm. Now, let's start close to home. First of all, debating was not built for us, not in the racial sense. This debating chamber, this tradition we love, was never designed with people like us in mind. It was built by and for the privileged, white, cisgender, well-educated men to practice arguing, to hone their rhetoric flair, and to train for leadership. Not for people of color, not for queer folk, not for gender minorities. So when the proposition says inclusion won't save us, I want to ask them, what version of us are you talking about? I also want to touch about the fact that inclusion is not a luxury. It is survival. Let's be honest, we don't champion inclusion because it feels nice. We champion it because without it, people suffer. Without it, people leave. Women of color dropping out of the reading circuits because their intelligence is questioned more than their arguments. Translators stop attending competitions because their pronouns are mocked or ignored. Muslim women wearing hijabs are seen as too different and too soft-spoken. Inclusion isn't about quotas, it's about protection. It's about retention. It's about saving people from the death by 1,000 paper cuts that comes with being the only one in every room that you ever enter. Inclusion won't save us, and why do we lose so many people when it isn't present? Furthermore, inclusion is already saving people. Fellow members of the opposition brought really great points about how inclusion has helped us, but I bring up another point, and that's the Access Program, a program that provides bursaries and structural supports for Irish travelers, people from direct provisions, and those who grew up in care. These are not symbolic gestures, these are lifelines, ensuring people who would otherwise never enter the gates of this university can not only access it, but thrive within it. Without initiatives like these that purposely include these marginalized communities, most students don't even know the beginning of applying to college, let alone attending institutions like Trinity. My friend Chloe, an Access ambassador, put it powerfully. To say inclusion won't save us assumes that we are the only ones worth saving. But there is a whole lot of them who wouldn't survive without inclusion. So you could say it has already saved them. You see, when we talk about who inclusion saves, you must ask who gets to be us, the privileged few in this room, or the wider society that we claim to serve. It also doesn't matter why our foot is in the door. Here's something the proposition may never understand. It doesn't matter why our foot is in the door, all that matters is that it's finally there. Because for people of color, for women, for queer and translators, the door has been shut out for centuries, blocked out by colonization, guarded by class, and sealed with silence. And when we finally wedge our foot in through Access, through DI, through whatever initiatives or programs put forth, we are told that we don't belong, that we're only here for optics. What you must understand is that inclusion wasn't given to us. It was fought by us. We earned the right to be included. We weren't handed inclusion on a silver platter. You are living your ancestors' wildest dreams, the result of ongoing civil rights movements, and you take it for granted? Seriously guys, let me be crystal clear. Inclusion doesn't guarantee success. It's hand anyone can win. What it does give is a fighting chance, a chance to show up. PhD have always been told to make their turn, to be grateful, not to be too loud, not to be too angry, too visible. Where we're here now, and it doesn't matter why we arrived, all that matters is that we are here. The proposition also brought some wonderful points about the fact that inclusion is not enough and that we need greater social reform. But I argue inclusion must precede justice. The proposition, they clear this point, and I agree to a certain extent, but here's a catch. You can't have justice without inclusion. Because if people aren't even in the room, how are they meant to fight for change? How are they meant to challenge bias, rewrite formats, demand safer spaces if they can't even speak? Inclusion gets us in these rooms to actually create viable change. Inclusion is the first stage of this social reform for resistance that they proclaim that they desire. And also, here's one thing, what's the alternative of inclusion? If not this, then what? What is the proposition's policy? What do they claim? Nothing. That's right, because there is no other better alternative. It starts with inclusion, and then that is the building block in which everything else is based upon. You don't get racial equity without including racialized voices in your decision making. You don't get gender justice without letting gender minorities lead and speak and be heard. So yes, inclusion may not be the end of the journey, but try starting a social reform journey without inclusion. Without the inclusion of racialized groups in politics, or women, or other gender minorities. And I accidentally switched the Google Docs page. Lovely. Okay. Okay. So this debate group is also not truly inclusive, and let's bring that home for a second. I mean, let's reflect on this very room. Maybe not this room, but this building as a whole. Ask yourself, who's not here tonight? Whose voices were not heard? Who never made it past the sign-up form because the space didn't feel safe or welcoming? Ask if this debate was held upstairs in one of the convo rooms, how would someone in a wheelchair get there? If English wasn't your first language, would you feel comfortable competing if you were black, queer, neurodivergent? Would you feel like the space was built for you if it weren't for initiative and subcommittees like the Eliz and the Udoma that fight for us to have our place here and encourage our participation in these wonderful debates and this wonderful tradition? The truth is, we have so normalized exclusion, we've forgotten to notice it. And that's why inclusion matters, because it makes us notice, it makes us act and take action. And I'll take your honor.
How can we rely on people who continuously build exclusions to include the same?
Well, that's the thing. We've spoken about it. You guys have spoken about it relentlessly. DEI initiatives, access programs, whatever the case may be. The reality of it is, sure, they let us in, but for optics and for optics alone. But let's not forget, these optics don't matter, because what really matters is the physical change that comes about these optics. I don't care why I was let in the door. All that matters is I'm in the room right now, and that's what actually matters. That's what creates physical change in this reality. I mean, okay, so they let women into Trinity in 1904. Do you think that these women would be like, oh no, I don't want to go in because you let me? Obviously not, because they fought for these initiatives as well. They fought for these initiatives. We fought for DEI. We fought for these initiatives that give us a fighting chance. So, no, I think your point does not make any rational sense. Thank you, and I hope you just voted for opposition.
Come along, you get to meet some of our council, we get to know you guys better, so please, if you do have the time, come along. Okay, vote time. If you want to side with a side proposition, this house believes that inclusion will not save us, say yay. If you want to side with side opposition, shout nay. Yays?
Yay!
Nays?